Okay, let's move over to Asia and the Pacific for the Holocene agriculture. So starting again in Southwest Asia. Again, these are linked, so we just put Southwest Asia in many places, and Southeast Asia and Pacific, and of course China and Japan. Will come back to the Indian subcontinent in the next podcast. And the innovations. So we are going here from 8000 BC onwards to Jericho. Chapter 15 will come to Uruk. Actually, we will mention Uruk in a couple of podcasts in different contexts. Sumerian civilization, Assyrians, and Rome. Associated with those in Southeast Asia and Pacific, we have the Cook in New Guinea, cultivation in New Guinea starting early on again in the Holocene climatic optimum. Possibly the beginning of rice cultivation around 4000 BC in Southeast Asia. Phanom D, the site found around 2000 BC, much more complex. The Lapita complex, how people colonized these islands is always an interesting question. Southeast Asian states, so we will come to this in chapter 17. Settlements of Polynesia, so that's part of the Lapita complex as well, and settlement of New Guinea much later in the last millennium, a couple of millenniums ago. China and Japan, so the Homon tradition of Japan goes back to at least 8000 BC. So early farming settlements occurred there. Homo 2, Yangshao, Longshannoid, and we'll return this to in chapter 18. Shang and Yayoi here. The associated innovations include rice cultivation in China, root cultivation in New Guinea, rice cultivation in the Philippines later on, and offshore voyaging in the Pacific to colonize the islands. So here is the map of early Chinese farming cultures with names of some major local variants. Yangshao sites occur both within the northern shaded area and outside. Southern sites of corded pottery are found in Guangdong, Fujian, and Taiwan areas. So here is the modern day Taiwan. Daxi is here. Hunan, Kujiliang, I don't know how it's pronounced, and all these sites up here. Of course, rivers are always critical. Yangtze here, Huangho here. This is a tributary coming in to become Yangtze River, and Guangdong and Fujian here towards Taiwan. Okay, approximate distribution of later farming cultures in China are here. Again, around the rivers, Longshan in here, Yangtze River, Huangho, and so on into Taiwan as well. You know now the battles between Taiwan and China, and the history goes back quite a bit back in time, of course. Coming to the Pacific, this is a map of the Pacific sites. Dark shading shows the distribution of Lapita Cultural Complex. So here the Lapita Cultural Complex, and these are all the sites covering fairly large area of the open ocean, raising questions about how they got colonized. So over 40,000 BP we have the colonization here in New Guinea, but Melanesia comes in at 2000 BC, 8600 here, 8500, 8200. So the Rapa Nui are quite famous in many discussions. Samoa at 1800 BC, Hawaii much more recent, 1219 to 1269 AD. Tonga, Vanuatu at 900 BC, Micronesia at 500 BC to AD 1. New Britain here goes to 30,000 year before present, so these regions are much older here. So it's interesting how this one is, for example, AD 1200, and this is AD 500, and you have AD 600 at Tahiti, and so on. And New Zealand, of course, is AD 1000 to 1200, and Tasmania goes back to 32,000 BP because Australia is at 35 BC. So Lapita pottery culture is over here. To Summer Asia and the Pacific, I'm keeping these very brief just because we are just adding little bits of information to the main book. As in Southwest Asia, food production began in Asia during the early Holocene, perhaps as early as 10,000 BC, but became fully established in a cold interval that followed initial warming around 6500 BC. So you had the bountiful rain period, greening of Africa, and then the cooling and the drying. In southern China, some rice was cultivated perhaps as early as 8000 BC. Widespread rice agriculture was well established by 6500 BC. We'll visit the East Asian and South Asian monsoons also a little bit later on. The staple in the Yellow River Valley of northern China was millet, cultivated at least as early as 6500 BC and maybe even earlier. The Yangshao culture flourished over much of the Yellow River Basin, a society of self-contained villages replaced by the more elaborate Langshannoid cultures by 3000 BC. In Southeast Asia, the staple crop was rice, probably first cultivated along low-lying swampy coasts. New economies soon spread inland during the 3rd millennium BC, bringing village life to much of the region. Island Southeast Asia was settled by hunters and foragers at least as early as 38,000 BC, and simple root horticulture had been established in highland New Guinea by 6000 BC. The people of Lapita cultural complex traded widely throughout southwestern Pacific after 1600 BC, but it was not until the past 2000 years that offshore canoes settled Micronesia and Polynesia, and New Zealand was colonized just after AD 1200. So there are some evidences of shells and bamboos being used to map the waves, tides, and aids for navigating the ocean and so on. So the ocean navigation was definitely there when they started to colonize Micronesia and so on. Okay, so we'll leave this here and then come back and look at the next region in the next podcast.